Hello, welcome to my first podcast on I'm a Barzillai. Now, that's an interesting word. It's found in the book of First Samuel, Second Samuel, and it's an interesting story. I think you'll be intrigued by what I discovered about it. But I want you to know, first of all, that this podcast is not about me. But I want you also to know a little bit about me because you'll understand where I came from and everything that's been involved in my life to bring me to this point where I find this story of Barzillai so intriguing and so applicable to myself and to a lot of people out there who need a Barzillai in their life. So please hang on with me. First of all, let me give you a little bit of background. I'm a Chico boy. I grew up in a small town in Northern California called Chico, about 100 miles north of Sacramento. And it was an interesting growing up time. America was quite different then, of course. I found myself in that era having the freedom to enjoy liberty that kids don't have today. I mean, me and my friends explored the wonderful over, 1,200 acres park that was there. It's maybe even bigger than that. Climbing into the mountains, doing all kinds of fun things that kids did at that time. Both my parents grew up in Chico too, at least in their high school years. My dad went on later to be the vice principal of the high school that he attended and that I ended up attending in my teenage years. My mom also a student who went to young woman who went to Biola. At the time, it was still a small Bible college, not the university it is today. And they found each other, married. My dad had been in the Marines during World War II. He was not a Christian. Thankfully, after I found Christ, he became a Christian. But it was an interesting kind of life at that time because I was raised where we went to church. It was very much what a lot of boomers have come out of. America was prospering. We had a lot of good things about our country going on, but a lot of difficult things. It was an interesting time. But church was a big part of that. And I went to church. My parents took me, but I got just enough church to inoculate me. I remember going to Youth for Christ crusade. I remember also uh, be involved in Young Life camps. Both good ministries, but like I said, I got enough just to kind of inoculate me against the real gospel. And by the time I was 16, no longer going to church, kind of exploring everything a young man does when his hormones are launching and he's uh, he's out there kind of on the hunt. And by the time I was 18 and off to college, I found myself immersed in not the Jesus movement, that came later. I found myself immersed in the youth culture that day, the hippie scene. I was soon in Haight-Ashbury, involved in all the things of that counterculture, the drugs, the promiscuity, the music, touring with bands, actually even performing at the Film Auditorium with this color organ I'd created, and a lot of things just in that culture, but also empty and looking for something deeper. And as God's in His mercy brought across some of the very pioneers of the Jesus movement that came into my life even before they were known at all and set a course for me that changed my life. I found Christ the day after I turned 22 in a small group where an evangelist, a young man named Mario Murillo, was 19 years old. He read my mail, and it wasn't very long until I found myself. You know what I mean when I say he read your mail? I mean, it was like I'd never seen him in my life. He'd never seen me, but he knew exactly where I'd come from, what I was going through at that very moment. And I had an encounter with Christ where I knew that Christ was real. I was delivered from the evil spirits that were in my life and filled with the Holy Spirit. It was life transforming. And within 9 months, I found myself, which is unusual, being the assistant director of a halfway house where over the years we saw over 100 young men come through that program, coming out of the counterculture, out of drugs, out of all the kind of problems that they have there, finding Christ. The first 3 years of my marriage, Claudia and I lived in a small apartment there in that place. We were we were learning by doing. I did not have a lot of what we call formal uh, spiritual education. I did go to our Assemblies of God Correspondence College. I took all the courses, passed them. I was soon licensed in my late 20s and became ordained in my early 30s. But I learned so much about the ministry by doing it because within literally months after being a Christian, I found myself on college campuses sharing Christ, whether it be at a table where we were giving away Bibles, or whether standing and giving my testimony in the free speech area, or singing with our Christian contemporary group that we put together, touring around Northern California. And by my second or third year, I found myself as a Christian. I found myself as a campus minister on 6 college campuses in Northern California. We started a coffee house near one of the universities. We had a printing ministry. We had a television ministry. We had a radio ministry. We did rallies with thousands of people on campus and other venues throughout Northern California. I found myself involved leading teams into places like Berkeley in the middle of the anti-war movement. But we saw Christ over and over again move in a powerful way. And so that's where I was, and that's where I learned ministry. I founded a Jesus festival that went on for several years that had major Christian speakers come, Christian ministry, musical ministries come, thousands of in attendance. Many found Christ, and I soon found myself founding a Bible school that eventually became a Bible college. And I traveled, spoke, whether it be to thousands or to small groups or to churches or even in Bible training programs in missionary organizations. But I was busy in ministry. But shortly after I turned 40, a lot of things changed. I became a pastor. We found ourselves in San Diego, in a suburb of San Diego, and we started a church in a home with just four of us. That church in the following years, within 3 years, grew to almost 600 people. There was a lot of things that came out of that ministry there. It soon emerged that we started a medical mission that subsequently has now reached almost 250,000 people in 22 nations. Out of that emerged a feeding ministry that's serving literally thousands of people every month. And of course, training and ministry for discipling many people. But things changed when I got into that ministry of being a pastor. I've been an associate pastor on staff in a big mega church in Sacramento before we moved to Southern California. But it was that, rubber meets the road kind of thing of pastoring that really changed me. And it meant that, I went from ministering to thousands and traveling to just learning to sit in a restaurant with someone that was not famous or not important in a worldly sense, and finding deep satisfaction in just being there, shepherding them, caring for them, discipling them, and ministering to them, whatever their situation. It was a joy to do that, whether I did preached on Sunday, preached on 2 services on Sunday, one on Saturday night, one on Sunday night, or midweek preaching, or the Bible study, or training courses that we did, or bringing in special speakers and having special weeks of ministry. There were a lot going on there, but ultimately the greatest satisfaction was just the one-on-one ministry to people. And that is where I gained a shepherd's heart. And it took a while to get there. I'll tell you that. It really took a while to get there. because it's a lot different than being a traveling evangelist, a traveling teacher, speaker, and even being the president of a Bible college. It takes a different sort of heart. And with that also comes some deep wounds. And I remember what happened. We literally were thriving, growing, and suddenly you find some of your leaders deciding that they're going to go across the street, literally, and start another church. And you bless them and you try to endure that. And that happened three times, not always going across the street, but other places in our city. Eventually, all three of those churches failed, and even some of the people came back. But, it's painful. It can hurt when that happens. And I've had that happen even with fellow staff members where you feel like, wow, you're with people, you're growing, you're flourishing, and yet somehow there's conflict and issues that go on, and all those things kind of can leave you wounded and bruised and hurt. And this is something that a lot of pastors experience today. Maybe they don't have members of their congregation leaving and starting churches, but there's conflicts amongst staff or amongst members of your church that leave you wounded and hurt. And I know there's a lot of pastors today. There's figures that say, 7 out of 10 pastors say they do not have one personal friend. And that leads me to this story of Barzillai. When I turned 80 years old, uh, it was on December 8th. And during that time of 2025, during that time, about that time, my wife was reading in Second Samuel, the story of Barzillai. And it says Barzillai was a very old man. He was 80. We kind of made that a, a joke. But I went in and I began to investigate after laughing about it. Something inspired me to go dig into the life of Barzillai. And that's where I came across this amazing ministry that God gave this man and how it relates to shepherds shepherding shepherds. And that's where we're going to go in this book. We're going to talk about this story of Barzillai and what he did to another shepherd when that shepherd was in great need. So I hope you'll keep turning the pages. I hope you'll keep listening to this podcast and the other versions of it that I do. Again, thank you for joining me today.